So welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me on, Karen. We've been speaking about it for a while now. It's fantastic to finally sit down with you and talk about all things restoration project.
And all things Mark as well, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely all things Mark.
Well, all things Mark is what started the restoration project, and I've been hanging to have this conversation with you because as you know, I just absolutely adore you. I love what you're doing, and it matters to me that people who have been through a journey, have got the courage and the humility and the vulnerability, to bring that out to help other people. And I just think that's how we get a better world. So I absolutely adore you for that. So I'm so happy to have you on here.
Thanks so much, Karen. The feeling is more than mutual.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Yeah.
Very much adore you too.
Oh, that's fabulous. So in the intro, we covered a lot of stuff like, how things were going for you, and you got into, things got really bad for you. But before we get into that, like, what was life like for you as a kid and a teenager?
Yeah, life was fantastic. Had a fantastic upbringing. Mum and dad. Dad was been a hard worker his whole life. Mum was a fantastic, caring, doting mother. We never went without. They always done their absolute best to provide whatever us kids needed. We didn't go without anything at all. All done through lots of hard work. The dogs are just coming for another quick visit. So I grew up in Hayfield, so a small town in Gippsland. Sorry, Karen, I'll just pass this dog.
Apologies about that.
I grew up in Hayfield, small timber town, obviously a lot of sawmills, and a really proud sporting community. And as a young man, that's what I was especially drawn to, was that sporting culture and football and cricket. Went to primary school in Hayfield. But looking back now, Karen, it was very, very evident that even as a young boy that I had some mental health issues very early on, extremely early on. But it was a very normal childhood. One thing looking back now, I was such a worrier. I was always worried about everything. And and that's probably pretty unusual for a young child. And now, like that, I know anxiety and those kind of things. I kind of talk about anxiety and that feeling of impending doom. Just that there's always something around the corner, like you're just worried about something going wrong. And I just grew up with that kind of knot in my stomach, like since I can remember. But there was one thing that took that away, and that was sport. So once I'd get out on that ground, or whether it be football, cricket, basketball, that would go. And that was my comfort zone, was sport.
And, it's funny, isn't it, when you talk about, as you look back at when you were a kid, there was always mental health issues. But back then, it wouldn't have been spoken about. And back then, it would have just been, what are you worried about? Everything's good and sort of brushed under the carpet, and that sort of stuff. Not that doesn't mean that you had bad parents, but back then we didn't talk about that stuff. And it was kind of like, what's this kid anxious about? You'll be right. And we didn't deal with stuff very well back then,
And it's only been since I've gone through what I have in my later life that you become a lot more retrospective and look back at those early behaviours and how you felt as a child, and because you're trying to get sense out of why you may have gone down the track that you did. And looking back now, was just so evident that I had really, really bad anxiety from a young kid, and especially around schooling. Not so much primary school, but I remember the transition from primary to high school, and I remember Like, you remember going from year 6 to 7, and to me that was just absolutely petrifying. I was so scared, but it was, once again, it was sport that carried me through that, like football and playing. And I played some really good football as a youngster and as a young man as well. So it was kind of something that I'd be able to make friends through, because like I was okay at it, and then when I went to Sale, and then got into with all the other blokes from Sale and that kind of stuff, it was just what carried me through all my anxiety was, and especially football.
Yeah. And it was probably one of those things too that you never talked about either. It's like, I'm not going to talk about this because people will judge me, or people will exclude me or reject me, that sort of stuff. And I think that's worse. We carry that sort of stuff, shove it down, and it actually makes it 10 times worse when it finally does express itself. And, and that's what happened to you anyway. So,
and in all honesty, like, I didn't even know that I felt that way. As I said, it's only because it's only been a very retrospective thing to look back on and say, and now understand how I'm geared now to actually okay, now I understand why you were like that as a child.
And perhaps maybe even you might have thought that everyone else felt the same. Like,
that's right. You don't know.
No,
and
it's
I
funny.
remember like being and football was kind of my dream, as in, like, I thought, like all of us young blokes and that, we want to play in the AFL. That's a dream. And at the time when I was at Hayfield, they had a really successful period. I think there was 4 boys that from a real small town that were playing in the AFL. So that dream seemed like it could become a reality if you were able to work at it and have a fair income crack. And it's funny, when I went to high school, then I started playing against some blokes from Sale and some blokes that a lot of them went on to actually play AFL, and I realised pretty quick that I probably wasn't up to that high level. So, but still, football was a great outlet for me.
So which team were you hoping to play for in AFL?
Well, it would have to be the Pies, I reckon. The Pies. I think it might have been Hawthorn back then, because I had a cousin that played for Hawthorn, so I think I was going for Hawthorn back then. I changed to the Pies, and probably the worst thing I ever did.
I love it. Well, so what happened? Like, let's get into the nitty gritty, and because the story does end up well. It's a great story, but I think that I do want to get into the nitty gritty, because I want to, as you do, share that story with people, because I want people, if they're out there feeling like, or if they know someone feeling like this, I want them to know that there's hope, and I want them to know that they're not alone, and that they can come through the other side. So to talk about the shitty stuff, like what happened that caused you to take that downward spiral?
Well, it was a slow burn. It was definitely a slow burn. We moved from Hayfield to Traralgon when I would have been 16. Mum and Dad being selfless people again, and that they just wanted to move somewhere to give us kids a bit more opportunity. So we decided to move on from Hayfield, and as I said, and that was a really hard transition again. I was transitioning from year 10 to another high school, not knowing anyone, and that anxiety and all that kind of stuff was really bad around that time. Once again, football carried me through, went down to Traralgon, got into a football team, and away I went. So the transition was quite good. Went to school, but still fighting that self-worth, self-esteem, highly strung, anxious, until I finished year 12. And when I was in year 12, I was lucky enough to be playing football out at Yennara at the time. And as a 17-year-old, I won a senior premiership with Yennara, and that was kind of like everything to me. Like, that was like, I thought, how good's this? And and that. But to scoot forward, because it kind of happened to when I was around 22, I was playing a game of football for Yuna out at Ballara, and I broke my leg. And so that one thing that I had my whole life that I felt like I was any good at was me comfort, it was me crutch. All of a sudden, it was gone, and I couldn't play. I was drinking a fair bit around that time, around just at the pubs and that football club kind of culture and going out every weekend. But drugs had been something that I'd never even contemplated doing, had no interest in it at all. When I broke my leg, I got really unhealthy. I found comfort in food. I should have been able to see that I had a very addictive personality, even that, because I kind of got addicted to food. I put on a lot of weight, and then so you've got someone who's already anxious, struggles with their self-esteem and self-worth, and then I got to put on a lot of weight, so that just intensified all of those feelings. I think I was about 120 kilograms, really unwell, and I went out to a nightclub one night, and I took one pill one night that changed the course of the rest of my life, and it took 8 years. That one pill one night took 8 years from me.
Wow. And so did that, you hear stories about people taking one pill, and there's some people that take one, never touch it again, it never affected them. Some people that take one and it actually kills them, and other people that'll take one and it triggers something in them, and it's kind of like, well, now I want another one. And how can I get another one? Is that, and that's where that was your path, wasn't it?
That's exactly what it was like for me. And for me, I'm very conscious, Karen, about I never glorify drug use in any way, because it's horrendous. There's nothing to glorify about it. But that night when I took that one pill, it filled that thing that I thought was missing in me all the time. All of a sudden, this bloke that had no self-esteem, he could talk to this for this one night. I could talk to people at the pub, and I could talk to girls, or I could do this, and it just gave me this confidence. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I can't do this stuff normally. So it was just like this super pill that gave me all this confidence to do all this stuff, even though the next day I obviously felt absolutely horrendous when you come down from it. But it just kind of set it in motion. And I think that I chased that high for a long time, that first initial high of feeling that way, of euphoria. And we know what it obviously do with drugs and your endorphins and that kind of stuff. So yeah, just kind of, if I could go back and change, I say that if I could go back and change one night in my life, that would be the night. But having to see where I am now, and that, I honestly think I was kind of meant to go through my life's journey to come to where I am today.
I hear that a lot too. I speak to a lot of people, and they're kind of like, it's a tragedy, what they went through, and it's kind of like that was such a pivotal point. And it's like, wow, imagine where I'd be today. But in actual fact, I like what you're saying, because if you didn't do that, and I don't want to glorify drugs either. I freaking hate them, and I hate the assholes who sell them, and I just, the whole thing pisses me off, something shocking. But I understand how people in your situation, I understand how it happens. But I've known too many people that we've lost, because of this bloody thing. But if you probably could have been playing amateur footy, you probably could have had a job, just an average job. You probably could have been in an unhappy relationship. And I'm not saying that's what it would have been, but you probably could have just had a life that you were always not quite happy, just not quite fulfilled. But you go 100%. This way. Oh, sorry, Martin.
100% agree, Karen. Like, I really do, because I was someone I wasn't driven at all. I had no drive, or I was working, but it wasn't like, what am I going to do with my life? I didn't have a thing where I wanted to be a sparky, or I wanted to do this. It was just like I just wanted to play country footy. But that's all I wanted. That's kind of what I wanted to do. Like, and I had a printing apprenticeship, and the people that I worked, done my printing apprenticeship with, they're like my second family, and yeah, they seen me start to, obviously I was working at this point when I started to take drugs, and they obviously were a part of that, seeing me really start to slide. And it happened, it was slowly, and so I'll progress a little bit more with that.
Yeah.
So I took that one pill once, might have had another one for a month, Karen. It wasn't something that I thought I was gonna, but once I started doing it more often, the more I'd find that I'd chase it. So then I might do it once a month, and then I'd be doing it fortnightly, and then I'd be doing it every weekend when I went out, and then it'd kind of be Friday, Saturday night, and it just kind of progressed. It just kind of progressed like that, and then I always said that I would never use speed. I'd only do what I was doing, and then one time I couldn't get that, and someone had some speed, and I tried that. And then so that just kind of broke down another, like it's just kind of that progression. And then at 28, I always said that I wouldn't try methamphetamine. And at the age of 28, I tried methamphetamine, and by the age of my 30th birthday, I lost everything. Like, I bought a house, had a car, I had my beautiful oldest daughter, and I lost everything. It was all gone. They took it all away from me, and I'd like to say that that's kind of where then life started to get better, but it got a lot worse before it got better. Point.
Yeah, and so, and what happened there to get worse? Like, you did, yeah, give us the dirt, because I think people need to hear. Like, so far you're just saying, I had the drugs and you shouldn't do it, but I think we need to hear what the truth about what goes on behind the scenes when people really hit their darkest point. Because I want to deter people from going through this.
Yeah, of course, and there's nothing that I stand that I'm not happy to talk about, Karen.
Yeah.
So when things, like, it was obviously really bad. It got to a point where I wasn't working anymore. That job that I had, we made a mutual agreement that it was time to part ways, and that set a bit of, and that's absolutely nothing to do with them, but that set about a little bit of a spiral, because I wasn't working then, because I didn't have that thing that was that, well, I had to kind of keep it together to go and do that, and then the use was stepping up. I was using daily, every day, like every single day, and got to a point where I couldn't function without using. Like, I couldn't get out of bed. I was staying up for ridiculous periods. I was staying up for sometimes 7 days at a time without sleep. I was in psychosis. I was having delusions of people being after me and seeing things that weren't there. That's when, obviously, it was getting pretty bad then, and this was around the time when my parents found out. So my parents, to this point, were absolutely completely oblivious. They knew that there was something wrong, but they didn't know what it was. They thought that I was an alcoholic, which was probably wasn't an alcoholic, but I was drinking a hell of a lot. They thought I had a gambling addiction. Probably did. I was gambling way too much than what I could afford to do. And so when I told them that I had a drug problem, they were absolutely floored and devastated, and just sent them flying. It just wasn't what they expected, wasn't what they brought me up, or what they seen for me. So me and Dad went to Latrobe Community Health, was our first point of call. They wanted me to try and go and get some help, and met a lovely lady at Latrobe Community Health. Her name is Barb Hilton. Barb won't mind me talking of her. She's one of my bestest friends, and she was my first counsellor. But when I went in to see Barb, I was obviously very unwell and didn't even have an understanding, Karen, that I actually had a problem. And that's one of the biggest areas with addiction is, here's a bloke that he'd worked his whole life and he had a house, he had a car, and that was all gone. And you still don't think that there's an issue there. And that's the power of addiction.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after that, and things kept on progressing and putting myself in really dangerous situations. I was hanging out with bike clubs. I was hanging out with some gangs from down Dandenong way, and I'm not built for that life, Karen. Like, I'm not built for that. I'll give you the hot tip. And yeah, the family ended up having an intervention. Mum and Dad had an intervention, and I was around at Mum and Dad's house, and Dad had a turn while they were having the intervention. We thought he was having a heart attack, and they called the ambulance, and they made me ride in the ambulance with Dad. Mum was obviously so angry at me because obviously it was my actions, and that was making Dad so unwell. And when he got out there, we'd realised that it was a really bad panic attack, but I was in that bad a psychosis at that time when all that was happening that I thought that it was an act, and I thought I was just obviously not in any proper frame of mind. And anyway, when Dad got home and that, the next day he asked me to come in the bedroom and speak to him. He said, you've got a problem, mate, and we just want you to get some help, and would you come down to Melbourne and talk to this gentleman? And there was always still that soft boy underneath everything, Karen. I was still that same little boy that had a good heart and that kind of stuff, so they could always still kind of talk to me. I went down to Melbourne and have a speak to this gentleman, and they wanted me to go into rehabilitation. So, and I was just like, this is what you see in the movies, like rehab. Like, I don't need that. But yeah, so had a pretty frank conversation with this bloke, and I thought I'd be able to get around him. And he said we wanted to come down to our rehab in Geelong for 3 months. And I was like, I don't need it, and I'll be right. I'll go home. I can do it myself. And he held up a photo of my daughter, and he said, do you want this girl to have a father? I said, of course I wanted to have a father. He said, because you're at the point now that if you don't get some help, that you won't. There's 3 things that happen to people in your current circumstances, and there's jails, institutions, or dead, and you're about to go, and your option's about to go into the institution. So off I trundled.
Wow. How long were you in there for?
3 months.
Yeah. So you stayed the full term. How much do you think you changed from being in rehab over that 3 months?
Lots. Like it taught me a lot. So it taught me about addiction. I had no understanding, Karen. I had no understanding at all of addiction, and that it's an illness. I just thought I was weak. I just thought I was someone that was really weak and that I couldn't stop. The one that I went to was called a therapeutic community, and basically what that involves, Karen, is just teaching you how to function again as a member of society, going to bed at a reasonable time, waking up in the morning, and they'd make you your bed. They'd make you have some breakfast, go for a walk. It was just literally getting you back into some sort of routine. And this is probably the one, and this is what you say about warts and all, Karen. And sometimes I forget, like, because it has been a period ago. But let's step it back into that first bit of rehab. When the reality set in of being there and what my life had become, I was devastated, distraught, just cried and cried and cried and cried and couldn't stop crying, because I'm like, how did me lie? Like, how did I go from working, having friends? How did I end up in rehab? Like it was literally like a bad movie. And when I went in there, they had me on like a Valium detox. They had to detox me with some ridiculous amount of Valium because I was just so unwell. And Mum had to come and do some paperwork or something one day, and I still to this day don't remember it. I seen them and I was speaking to them and I was upset and I was saying I'm so sorry for what I've done, and they just said I was like the lights were on but nobody was home, and I literally can't actually remember ever having that conversation with them.
Wow. Imagine the pain your parents went through.
Oh, and they said when I got into rehab, it was like an absolute relief to them that they knew that I was safe for a small period of time, because it was at the point that they were waiting for a knock on the door that I'd been arrested, or I'd lost my life. Like that's where it was at for them. And I'd like to say that I went to rehab in Karen and then happy days, and that she was a downhill spiral even after rehab. And that's when obviously the addiction took me to new lows and that kind of stuff. And they talk about in rehab, and they teach you about using on knowledge. And when you relapse, when you've been into a rehab facility, it's not like when you used to use narcotics or anything like that. It's very different, and there's a great shame attached to when you use, because you know that you're letting so many people down, and the work that you've tried to put into yourself. So relapse is a horrible thing for everybody involved. And addiction's such a selfish, it's such a selfish disease. Like, you really do put the people who care about you the most through the ringer.
And people need to hear that, because people who are thinking, oh, my life's shit, I'm just going to take drugs and that. I think that we forget, people forget how hard it is on those who love you, who are sitting by watching, and they feel so helpless. And I can understand your parents, they love you with all their heart. They're so bloody angry with you, and why did you do this? Why did you go this way? And then there's got to be a feeling for them is, what did we do wrong? What did we do as parents that failed you?
And that's a lot of the work that I can talk about a little bit later on that I do with the families that I work with now, is to try to get them to understand that it's no fault of theirs. And no fault of the families. And that's another thing that's really hard for the families, is there's not much that they can actually do. They can support and care, and then there's a very fine line between supporting and enabling someone's addiction. You can support someone to get well, but then if you're enabling the addiction, whether you're giving them money or constantly giving them a roof over their head so there's no consequences for their actions, it's a very fine line between enabling and being supportive. So more families cop it.
That is a huge fine line, and I've seen it myself in personal circumstances. Is that line is, you don't want to hurt someone and you don't want to have the consequence too severe, but that if you just slightly go the other way, you are enabling it, and it's a bloody tough conversation in families. And well, before we go on to the restoration project, because that's the good part, and that's what I really want to talk about. Make sure we get really good guts of that. But what was it? You said you come out of rehab and you relapsed again. What was that thing that made you just snap and say, "That's it. I'm absolutely done with this shit, and I'm changing my life"? Like, that must have been something really big to do that.
And that's the crazy thing. It actually wasn't. It actually wasn't. But that's the probably the best part about it, which showed that I was actually ready. So the big relapse I had when I got out of rehab, and this is just to give it warts and all again, it's an important part of the story to show people where addiction will take you. So There was a gentleman I met up with in rehab, and for the first 2 months of rehab, I put in a lot of work and effort, and then the last month of rehab, I probably had 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
I wasn't probably doing it properly, and I met up with this bloke, and I thought he might be a good bloke to meet up with outside if I'm ever going to play up or anything like that. So yeah, I think I've been in rehab for about 3 months, and my poor parents, once again, as I talk, was one of the most selfish humans ever known to man at this time, that they went on a holiday, the holiday for them to go away overseas to be able to celebrate them. Mark had got it together and was doing well, and I in my selfish ways, thought that would be a good time to relapse. And I caught up with this bloke from the rehab, and I went down to Melbourne, and he thought it'd be a good idea when we come down and meet some of these blokes that he knocks around with and that kind of stuff. And when I got there, I found out very quick, Karen, that I was an unwanted, an unwelcome guest to that house. Some of what they were doing wasn't ideal, and so they kept me there for 3 days against my will. So they basically kidnapped me and they assaulted me, and done all sorts of pretty average things, and then they made me do something to basically prove my worth, and they let me go. And then when I was on my way home, Mum and Dad found out I relapsed, my sister, and then I had a big fight with my family, and they were obviously absolutely devastated again. And then they called the rehab, and they actually said to them, what should we do? Should we send Mark back into rehab? And the rehab said, no, we don't think you should. You've done everything for Mark. There's actually one thing that you've only ever not done, and that was cut him off. Now, that's a really big thing for families to hear as well, Karen, is actually sometimes they've got to put themselves first, and you're on your own. We've done everything we possibly can for you. You're actually on your own. So They did. Hardest thing that they ever done. I had 24 hours to get me stuff and get out of their house, and they had the locks changed, and I was on my own. It was up to me then what I wanted to do and whether I wanted to get well. So had a couple more smaller relapses after that. I was really trying though. I was going to meetings and doing those kind of things. And that moment for me, Karen, that you asked about, was one simple night. It was North Gippsland football grand final night. I went down there and had a few beers. Once again, when I do that, I ended up relapsing, and I was at a house, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was using, and I call it a moment of clarity, and I was crying when I was doing it, and I just thought to myself, what are you doing? Like you're crying while you're doing it. Obviously it's not fun, but obviously that this has just got to stop. So that was the day I got fair income. And that's the day I really stepped about it, like, and done whatever it took a bit, like, to get my recovery. But even when you make that decision, Karen, it is the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life. The hardest. To that obsession to use, like, you just thought about it, and dreams, like having using dreams. It was just a battle. It was just a 24/7 battle for a long period.
Wow. Imagine your folks, I'm trying to think as a parent, saying you've got to cut off your kid, and knowing in that you could be sending them, to the grave, like, really, because, and how do you do that as a parent? Like, I know there's no option. I know you get to a point where it's kind of like, what are we going to do? And also, you're killing your parents. If they keep trying to do it with you, you're going to take their lives. So I guess it comes to a point that they have to take care of themselves. That's really bloody tough. Like that hurts my heart just thinking about both sides, how would they feel doing that to you? And then how do you feel being completely abandoned by your family? That's and this is the shit about this the whole drug thing. It's kind of like, you know, I know a lot of teenagers say, oh yeah, my parents are just shit, you know, but Jesus damn, you know, your parents love you with all their bloody heart, you know, and we don't all show it the best ways, but
that's right. I think for me, like, I had an understanding of what by that point, I had an understanding of what I'd put them through, and start seeing that pain and worry, and that's, so I had a good understanding of why they were doing what they were doing. It was more just, and you know, honestly, it was one of the things. It kind of gave me that bit of breathing space as well, like to say, right, I haven't got mum and dad looking over my shoulder and making sure that I'm doing the right thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to be monitoring you all the time, that right now you're on your own. You're going to decide whether you're going to go and hang around with these people.
Yep.
You're going to get into something that's worthwhile and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so in early recovery, it was really, really tough. It was super tough. There'd be times where I'd make myself go to bed, Karen, because I knew that if I didn't, that I was going to do something that I'd regret. And that went on for a year. Like, that went on for every part of a year. Like, I thought when I'd go to when I was going to meetings and that, and you'd see people that are a year clean and that, and I thought that's just a miracle number. And once you get to that year, that you'd be okay. But what I found out, it wasn't actually until I started to address those issues that had been an issue for me from even when I was a kid. When I started to address my anxiety, when I started to address my self-worth and my self-esteem, that's when I started to turn a corner. Yeah. That's when I started to say, hang on a second, there's more to this recovery than just the substance. Yeah. And that's the thing that I talk to a lot of people about recovery and that kind of stuff. I know people that have long time sobriety time, but they haven't addressed their mental health issues. Yeah. And the poor things are still doing it really, really tough. You've taken away the substance, but when you go into recovery, you're meant to recover. You're meant to get a good life back. And they told me that I'd have a life beyond my wildest dreams if I did what they asked, if I did the program, and if I got and sought the help that I needed. And I truly do now. Yeah. I truly do. Yep. In every aspect of my life. My life just keeps, and I look at birthdays now. I've just had my birthday, and I look at birthday to birthday now, and I find that I've got so many more fantastic people coming into my life, Karen. Like, you're a perfect example. Every year I've just got these great people coming into my life. Yeah. My life just gets richer by the year now. Well, speaking of great people coming into your life, your beautiful wife, you know, I heard you speak a few weeks ago. I've got to be careful what I say here, Karen, because I was on Tiff's podcast the other day, and I said she was a little bit bossy. So I saw that. I might have to just behave today. She's absolutely beautiful. But I saw you talk a few weeks ago, and you said something that I wrote down, because I wrote it in my phone because it just touched me so deeply. And you said that she loved you back to life. And oh my God, you brought a tear to my eye. You know, hey, tell us about meeting her, because I know you said, what the hell? Why would she want me? Why would she want me? Exactly exactly how I feel. Well, when me and Beck first met, it was through a friend who was playing Cupid, bless her heart, and and me and Beck got talking, but just from the get-go, I remember, because generally people that would contact me, Karen, would be for support, like because they've got a loved one who thing. I said, I wouldn't, it's not unusual that I'll get a friend request or something from somebody that I don't know, because they would have heard that, like what I do with families and that kind of stuff. But anyway, I got talking to Beck, and we went out on a couple of dates, and I've been someone that's always been super transparent about my past. Absolutely transparent, especially in a small community and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, Karen, people like to talk and that kind of stuff. So I've always made sure I've been transparent. And that was one of the first signs that she was just different. She was just different, as when I told her about my problems and what I'd been through. It was like it just didn't even register. It was just like it didn't matter. And that was, for me, a great feeling, because at that time I hadn't had many people, even family, some family, you feel like from what I went through and then coming out that other side, that there was a little bit of a different feel for you. But for Beck to have that absolute stranger come in and just have absolutely no judgment, it was
how beautiful.
It was just really special. And then we started seeing each other, and she's built me confidence from the ground up. Like I was obviously doing that work on my self-esteem and self-worth and that kind of stuff anyway, but she was one of the first people that ever made me just try things to get out of my comfort zone, because I'd be someone that, out of the fear of failure, Karen, I'd prefer not to try something at all because I didn't think that I could do it. And Beck was the person that taught me, and she always used to say to me, what's the worst that can happen?
Yep.
Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work. Who cares? And then that's kind of what I thought. And I thought, well, wow. And then I started doing things. And I'm like, I can do that. Like, I actually made that, or I did this. And so it was just those kind of things. And she's like a model. Like, I don't understand it, Karen. Don't tell her. I don't get it. But but yes, and she just literally just believed in me. She'd always just say to me, I wish that you see what I see. Because I was absolutely busted by this point. Like I was pretty, like, yes, I was clean in that. I was still running pretty rough.
Well, she's the one. There's no doubt about that. So, but now
we had our who, and this is another very special thing. We had our daughter Georgie together. So I've got two beautiful girls. I've got Lacey and Georgie. Lacey's amazing. They make me emotional. My girls. Lacey's so beautiful, and she's got such a good nature. And then we have Georgie, who Dad called the miracle baby, because no one thought that I was ever going to be fit enough to be a father again.
Yeah.
And I'm a bloody good father, Karen.
I know.
I take great pride in being a father. And obviously I made some mistakes as a young father, like when I obviously was unwell. It's fantastic to be able to have that chance to do it right again. But it's also so good to be able to have that chance to be the father that my oldest girl deserves for the rest of her life as well.
Yeah. Wow, I just love this outcome. It warms my heart so much. It could have been disastrously different, but
I'm blessed too.
Yeah,
there's definitely strokes of luck. There's luck. There's definitely hard work, Karen. There's definitely hard work, but there was definitely a little bit of luck involved. Like there was instances where I was only a knock on the door away from a very different fate, as like I would have had a record or in something like that. And I've been very lucky where I came away with no record, and that hence why I've been able to do the work that I do now and in my job. Working with people with disabilities that I'm just absolutely so passionate about, to be able to support people and to help. Because this was a bloke that couldn't help himself. This was actually a bloke that couldn't get out of his own way. To be able to give back now and just be a good member of the community.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the restoration project, because we can't actually get off this podcast
No.
without you telling us about that. And
No, definitely not.
That's all like you giving back. So tell us like why you started it and what you're doing with it.
Yeah. So why I started it, Karen, was it kind of come to a bit of a head because when people know that you have good sobriety and good recovery, and people see you rebuild your life and see you become successful and have a good job and a family, and that people are desperate. People who have loved ones that are suffering, or they're desperate to speak to somebody that may be able to give them an answer. And I don't have answers for people, Karen. I can only ever speak about my story and what I've been through. And I'm very open with families, and that when they speak to me, they can ask me any question that they want, and I can only speak from my experiences.
Yeah.
So it kind of come about from that, as if I was gonna get contacted whether I liked it or not, because people they're desperate, so they will ask. So I was doing a mental health walk that me and my one of my very good friends, Susie Lewis, have done the last 2 years, and we're going to do again this year. And it started on that first one, and I was discussing with Susie, I want to do something, but I don't know what it is, like around AOD and mental health and supporting people, and I don't know what it is. And I've done a little bit of speaking in that already at a couple of sporting clubs and that kind of stuff. So the biggest thing to me that I've always thought about, what could help to make an impact. And to me, the biggest thing that we can do to have an impact is education and prevention. If once you already have people who have addictions, and when they're in addiction, you got to fight ahead of you. But if we can actually educate kids and go in and speak to them and speak your story and say, this is what can happen. This real life story. I've got photos. I've got horrendous photos, Karen, of when I was, and some of them I can't show. I probably show the best of how I looked in that addiction, because it's even still too raw for me to look at how unwell I was. And to go in there and give them give them a visual of what addiction can be and how simple it can be. Like, you can take one pill. It doesn't happen for everyone, but it does happen, because that's exactly what happened to me. And another thing that we done for my presentations is we had a documentary made. We had a mini documentary made, and it was with my parents, with my best friend, my counsellor, and my school teacher. And it gives people a look at addiction from a family's perspective, and it's actually really powerful. And I think it's really moving for kids to be able to put themselves in if that was their family as well. So it's got that view from the person who's been suffering, and then it's actually got that view from the people who have had to live it and watch their loved one go through it. And I'm big on education and prevention, and we're actually really starting to get some traction now. So we've been doing the sporting clubs. I've got a couple more sporting clubs, and I've got the one that I'm super proud of, Karen. I've got Kurnai College coming up this month.
Fantastic.
So happy to be able to get into the schools, because that's where we can really make an impact. I've also just been asked to do 2 talks at they're putting in a drug and alcohol plan across Latrobe, and I've been asked to go and speak at 2 events for that on what the basically on what the services, how the services can involve the consumer. So it's people with lived experience and that, so they can be part of those conversations on what might be helpful.
That's great. That's fantastic. So where do you, what are your plans for the future? Like, I know you're saying I'm super proud of Kurnai, and and I've got these other things which is fantastic, because it's evidence that it's building. where do you want to go? Like,
I
how
want
do
to
you?
go into every school that there is, Karen. I want to
Yeah.
get into every youth organisation because that's where the real impact can be made. And if I can share one story with you,
Yeah.
one that I'm super proud of, and I know he doesn't mind me talking about him. I got a business reach out to me when the restoration project was really young, very, very early stages, and the company reached out to me and they said, we've got this 15-year-old kid working for us, fantastic kid, all the potential in the world, but he's taken every drug under the sun. 15 years old, taken every drug under the sun. We don't know what to do with him. Would you be able to possibly have a chat? And I said, of course I can. And so we set up a breakfast and we all went out for breakfast together. And it was a simple chat, Karen. We just spoke about, I said, what are your triggers and what's causing it? Self-esteem, self-worth, anxiety, all the usual stuff that it always is. And
Yeah.
I said, well, what we'll do is we'll put some things in place. I got a lot of satisfaction out of exercising and getting fit. So I took him to a couple of fitness classes and we just started to build a bit of a relationship. And anyway, he said about his recovery and he hasn't missed a beat. He hasn't missed a beat from the get-go. He sends me photos every month of his cake that he gets himself for being another month sober. He's over a year clean now. He's doing a junior management course with that same company now that reached out. And I said to him, what was it? Was there anything that was said that made a difference to you or made you think? And he said that I said to him that you're too good for this.
Wow.
Something so throwaway and so small that you're too good for this. And he's 15. I didn't want him to waste another 15 years of his life of like 30, like being 30 like I was before you have a realization, because a lot of damage can be done in that time. And some people think back from that damage.
Wow.
It's
what
really,
a story.
But it's really impactful. Like, it's really impactful of what you can do when you speak to the younger audiences. And there has not been and I can generally try to gauge a talk by when I do it, and you'd be the same, Karen, when you present and that kind of stuff, by the feedback that you get after it. And there has not been one presentation that we've done yet that hasn't sparked a conversation after the event. We're not going into places and speaking with people that are openly saying they've got drug problems.
Yeah.
Going into sporting clubs. We're going into government organisations, corporate. There hasn't been an event yet where there hasn't been a conversation that hasn't had someone reach out and say, hey, I could do with a little bit of guidance or support here. Now, that might be mental health, that could be alcohol and other drugs, but it's amazing by having the conversations that it can open up. Yeah.
And not only that you're actually making it okay. You're taking away the weakness feeling. You're giving people permission to say, well, wait a minute, this isn't weak. He's just shared his story. It's okay for me to be vulnerable and ask for help. And I think that's the biggest thing of all, is that you're making it okay for people to reach out.
And also you're breaking down, and a lot of the other stuff is breaking down that stigma, because there's such a stigma. I think the stigma around mental health, we're really actually starting to get there. I think we're definitely heading in that right direction. The stigma around AOD is still there, and it's still very, very large. Like, I listen to a lot of speakers and that, and I just noticed, and have a look, Karen, and see what you think, but I looked up AOD speakers, so like TED Talks, that kind of stuff. It's been years and years and years since those TED speakers were AOD. It's very much gone into that mental health zone now, where I think AOD is kind of, yes, it's obviously a very big part of mental health, but it's kind of on the back burner a little bit. And I think it's easier to say mental health, which then culminates AOD in it, rather than still specifically thinking about, hey, AOD is a big problem on its own. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And it's a bigger problem now than it ever was. And
And one thing that makes me wild, and this is another thing why I'm so passionate about schools and that kind of stuff, is the glorifying of drug use on social media, our social media platforms of TikTok, and like it's scary having young kids. It's scary having young girls, because it's just made to be like when we used to go and have a beer, that they go and do that. And I've seen firsthand the effects of what it can really do.
Yep. And I've seen firsthand, secondhand, and having to support a teenager through it. And it is that whole glorified problem that is and it's not the glorifying it after the fact, but it's the glorifying of just have a pill, just have one, just going to a party, who's got a pill, and the devastation that one thing can cause. And I'm not going to talk about it because it's not my place to speak, but I've watched it and I've seen it and I've lived through it, and it's I'm just so glad that you're doing what you're doing, and I'm so glad that you're getting into schools. And I pray to God that if anyone's listening to this that is is a chaplain in a school, or is a teacher in a school, or has any influence, works in a school in any way, that can go to the principal and say, listen, we've got to get Mark in, we've got to get the restoration project to come in, because kids need to hear it. They need to hear it from you, and they need to hear the shit. We a lot of the times I used to talk in schools about stuff, and they used to say, you can't talk about this and you can't talk about that, and make sure you don't mention this word. And I used to feel so, and I still do, a lot of schools feel so restricted, but they're missing the guts of it, when they're not hearing the truth. They've got to hear. And the kids, in a sense, they're trying to protect the kids. And I know the parents complain. I know all that shit, right? I get it. But, how the hell can a kid, how can you have an impact on a kid if they're not hearing the truth? They have to see the truth, So, man, I hope you get into so many bloody schools, and I hope your dream comes true. And it's such a selfless dream, and it's this is where your shit journey has turned into such a blessing. Well, for your life's a bloody blessing now, but you're also providing an opportunity for potential blessings for so many other people and their families. And I just love what you're doing, Mark.
Thanks, Karen. And I think probably one of the last things, or another thing that I'd like to say, is for the families and that kind of stuff, is to just never lose hope. Yeah. Like we always have hope, because you're looking at a bloke right now that they rid off. They wrote him off. He was going to be dead. He'd be in jail, or he'd be out there using, or being called every name under the sun, worthless, useless, hopeless, the whole lot. That you'll never amount to anything. You're just going to do the same. You're just going to keep doing the same shit. And that man right now is, and I don't care about job titles or anything like that, but I run my own successful business. I'm the interim general manager of the largest disability employment provider in Gippsland, where we look after 100+ staff. Like, you can actually achieve absolutely anything if you have a crack and you keep going. Like, just never lose hope. And if there's people out there that are struggling, if there's someone listening to this podcast that is struggling with their addiction, is the only person that can make the change is you. And if I could say that the one biggest thing in recovery, if someone said to me, what is the key to recovery? It's self-acceptance. Simple. Self-acceptance, taking responsibility for your actions, owning your shit that you've done in your life. Don't make excuses. Don't blame anybody else, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to yourself. And if you want to make that change, you can. there's plenty of services out there. There's some great services. And another thing I do in the restoration project is I can help people navigate the services on the best ways to get into rehab facilities and that, because there's some loopholes around superannuation, there's loopholes around private health insurance, and that there's ways to navigate the system.
Yeah.
Just have a crack.
Yep.
Because life can be so good if you want it to be.
Yep. I love that message that don't give up. There's always hope, and you've proven it. Just what you're saying, look at you. We're looking at you, and you've done that, and you're providing that hope. Our situation turned out fabulous as well. Because of the right support. So, Mark, I think you are just a bloody gem. I've told you 100 times I adore you. I love your guts.
You too.
Yeah, see, I'm only saying it so you'll say it back, but no.
I said to Beck tonight, I said, you got to meet Karen tonight, because she must think, talk about Karen all the time. I better introduce you to Becky. So.
That's bloody gorgeous.
But thank you for all your support, Karen. And it's been a little bit of a meeting by chance, but you have people come into your life, and and as soon as you actually meet them, you know exactly why.
Yeah.
And I knew that very quickly with you, that we definitely had something to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, the first time, Mark, I just saw him on LinkedIn, and he wasn't even a first contact, and I saw a post that he did, and it touched my heart so much, and I commented and told him what a beautiful thing it was, and I just loved it so much. And this is I guess this is a message to other people. We like to have LinkedIn as this professional thing, and everything else. We're all bloody human, and if you see somebody doing something fantastic, give them a bloody shout out. Give them a plug. Tell them, let them know that you're there watching them, and let them know that you appreciate what they're doing. Because if I didn't do that, we wouldn't have. Well, we would have connected through the leadership program, but we wouldn't have connected at the same deep level, initially. And I think that we've got so many barriers that we keep up. I've got to be professional. I've got to hold my shit together, and I've got to only say this. And what are they going to think? Screw that shit. Yeah. We need to be genuine, and we need to pour our love into other people and cheer for them and tell them what a frigging good job they're doing. That's what we've got to do for each other. We have to do that.
It really does make a difference. And one thing, and not that it matters, nor do I have to explain it, but one of the criticisms, and as you know, you get criticisms. Yep. In whatever you do, one of the criticisms when I started the restoration project was a couple of people saying you're trying to get financial gain out of other people's misery. It's absolutely never been about that. Do I get paid if I go somewhere and speak? Absolutely. Do I get paid for the hundreds of people that I take the time out to talk with one-on-one with their families? Absolutely not. Nor will there ever be a charge for that, because it's never been about that. I can quite easily go on about my life, Karen, and never speak it about again, and live a full and live a very full life. But I do it because I believe in it, and I do it because I really don't want people to go through this unnecessarily, and I also do want people to have some hope.
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be people like that. I remember going to this seminar once, and this guy said, when you're getting closer to your target, it's kind of like an airplane, a fighter jet getting closer to its target, you start getting shot at. And I always reckon that the more criticisms you get, the closer you are to bloody really doing that thing that you're supposed to be doing. So, and I reckon the people, I've said it 100 times on my podcast, I've done 100 and more on the 100 podcasts, and I reckon I've said it on nearly all of them. People like that are just bloody pissant cowards. People who bloody, just criticize people and pull each other down. Dead set. They're just bloody, I can't even, they're just freaking dickheads. And this is why you got to have, I mean it too. I don't care what comes back at me for that, because it's just, it's piss weak. And I think we've got to be supporting each other. And this is why it's so important when you get people in your corner who believe in you, just focus on what they're saying. stick with
Yeah.
them.
And it's funny too, because it's really easy to get caught up in it sometimes.
Yep.
To let them people to let it have an effect on you. I remember putting up some posts on the Restoration Project page and that kind of stuff, and you get the feedback. So, and it might have reached 2,500 people, and then there'll be a negative feedback.
Yep.
One person doesn't want to see this post.
Yep.
And not let that, like, not that you've reached 2,500 people and might have helped 100. I was too worried. What's old mate down here that's asking, that says doesn't want to see me posts anymore? But I've learned that you're going to have criticisms. That could be someone that can't deal with seeing that, Karen, because they've got a son going through addiction and it's too raw.
Yeah.
Like it's a fine line to navigate through all that, especially when you're putting yourself out there.
Yep.
And I am mindful of putting myself out there too much because I've got a family.
Yep.
I've got my family and that, and I could have been on the TV, I could be in the newspapers, and I've done some newspaper stuff around the walks and mental health and that kind of stuff, but I'm very choosy in what I do and who I choose to share my story with.
Yeah. Well, it's just gone out to all my listeners. So, you know,
Yeah,
you're not too bloody choosy, are you? Oh, I love you. Now, where can people find you? So you don't have a website, Mark, and we've got to get onto that. I reckon we need to do some.
I've got a very good man that I've been speaking to about building my website. So that's in the background. It's basically all through my Facebook and Instagram page at the moment. My Facebook page is the most active one.
Yeah.
But all my contact details are on there, email, phone number, and people can just reach out, and whether that wants to get some more information on our talks, some information on mentoring and those kind of things, just whatever people need, they can reach out.
Yeah, fantastic. And they are the Restoration Project, but you can also get Mark on LinkedIn as well. So make sure you do reach out to him because, Mark, you're just doing some bloody great stuff. You're probably, you know, people just having the guts to reach out to you is likely to save someone's life. And I just think that we can't underestimate the power of reaching out and, you know, doing this stuff. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining me, because this has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing honestly such a grungy story, but you know, if we don't hear the facts, we're not going to be impacted, we're not going to change, we're not going to think about it and carry it. So thank you so much. I just so appreciate you and everything you're doing.
Yeah, thanks very much to you too, Karen, as you know, adore you. One good thing too, Ynar Football Club have contacted me today, and to go out and present to the club where I played all of me footy, and to be presenting to their juniors in the next few weeks. That's one's going to be a really special one for me, because Ynar Footy Club held a very special part in my heart for a long time. So it'll be good to be able to go back out there and present to the up and coming kids through there as well. So looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. All these things are so heartwarming, aren't they? That, you know, you're not just doing a gig. You're feeling it right in the bottom of your belly. It's beautiful. Yeah,
you think about it all day.
Yeah, I know. I know. All right, well, I'm going to let you go, but Mark, I've loved this.
Thanks, Karen.
You're just a gem. So we'll catch up very soon. We keep saying it. We've got to actually make it hurry up and happen. So, yeah. All right. Take care.
All right.
Thank you. See ya.